Hello, this is Papa G, and welcome to Papa Can Cook. Today we're going to be cooking a hunter's stew. Why is it a hunter's stew? Because the main ingredient is brought home by a hunter. In this case, the hunter is my son-in-law, Brian, who got this deer and brought home so the key ingredient, which was butchered, and I have here the stew meat, which we will prepare for this dish. The other ingredients that are used are, this is basically it's a basic stew recipe. I've spiced it up or made it a little more interesting with some of the ingredients I'm using, but you don't have to be as fancy as this. Celery, we're going to be using some celery. We're going to be adding carrots, sliced carrots to the stew. I like to add, that's not in all the recipes, I like to add parsnips. Parsnips adds an extra flavor, a very interesting flavor. I'm using, in this case, pearl onions. It doesn't have to be pearl onions. If you want to just use a regular couple of small onions, cut them, quarter them up, and use them, that's fine. But in this case, I'm using a bag of pearl onions, and I'll show you how to easily get them out of their skins. Potatoes, in this case, again, a little fancier. I got the medley of different types of small potatoes. You could use small red potatoes, even Yukon Gold, and we're going to take these, cut them up, and put them in the stew. We're going to need, beef broth. I use this. You don't have to use this brand, but this brand is labeled as gluten-free. You have to check the label. Not all broths, chicken, beef, vegetable, are gluten-free. Then we're going to be using some spices, of course, salt and pepper, and paprika, and bay leaves. And one thing that I always like to add to my stews, and it's not in all the recipes, is I like to use the small or baby peas. And I don't usually get the frozen ones. I'll get the ones in the can. The reason is we'll put these in at the end and with the juice from the can, and it really makes it, it adds a sweetness to the stew. Okay, we have, one last ingredient I forgot is flour, gluten-free. Again, 1-to-1 flour is what I use. You don't have to use the 1-to-1. Okay, that's all the ingredients. Now we'll start to assemble it. So the first step in putting this recipe together is to prepare the veggies. So I'm going to be cutting up some of these veggies to put. I'll put them aside in a bowl. Okay, so I've already peeled and trimmed the edges, the ends on these vegetables. So I'm just going to cut up the celery. I'm going to cut them half lengthwise, and then a little bit more, about 1/4 of an inch to 1/3 of an inch thick. And put that in a bowl that I've put aside for it. I got the other. Carrots, I'm going to cut them again in half lengthwise and then slice them about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, I finished the carrots. I'm going to move on to the parsnips. Parsnips have an odd shape, so I'm going to cut them to where they just start to widen severely, and then slice them again into the same type of 1/2 inch pieces. The end here. I didn't have to cut this end lengthwise because it's small. That's just the way a parsnip is. In fact, this one's so wide, I'm going to cut it twice so that the pieces aren't too big. You want to make sure they're small enough so that they can cook, become nice and tender in the stew. Okay, now we're going to take the potatoes. I've already washed the potatoes. Depending on how large it is, something this size, I'll cut into quarters. The rest of them, like this size here, I'll just cut them in half. And we'll cut up all these potatoes and put them in with the rest of the vegetables. Well, I have the vegetables so far, the celery, the carrots, the parsnips, and the potatoes all cut up in my bowl. Now we're going to work on the pearl onions. What I did with the pearl onion is I took the onions whole, just the way they were out of the bag, and I put them in a pot of boiling water and I boiled them for 3 minutes. Then I transferred them into a colander and then put it back in the pan with water with ice in it to cool them down quickly. Now, here's how you get them out of the skins easily. You take the pearl onion, and this is the root end, and you cut that root end off. Then you hold it from the stem end, and you basically squeeze and push, and it'll come right out. All right, so let me show you another one. Here it is. Again, this is the root end. I'm going to slice that off. I'm going to hold it from the stem end, squeeze and push, and it pops right out. And I'm going to go through the rest of these. Then we're going to move on to how to prepare the venison meat itself. So the next step is to prepare the venison itself. This venison has already been cut up into cubes about 1 inch, so it's perfect for what we have to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to dredge it in a mixture of the gluten-free flour, paprika, salt, and pepper, which I whisk together. And I have a skillet with light olive oil that's heated. It started to shimmer, so it's good to go. I'm going to put several of these in here, mix them up, and I'm not looking to completely cook them. I just want to brown them. I'm going to put them in. Adds a nice flavor to the venison itself when you do this. Don't make the batch too large for what you're frying. This is about a pound and a half of venison, which I'm going to be serving to some of my family. Actually, it'll be we're cooking this for 6. So I'm going to let these cook, let them brown. As soon as they start to brown well, a little bit more, I'll flip them over to the other side, let it brown, and then I'll put them aside in this pan. Now, just a note about this recipe. I'm making a slow cooker version, and I'm actually making it for dinner tomorrow. So what I'm doing is I'm prepping everything today, and I'm going to cover it with saran wrap, put it in the refrigerator, and early tomorrow morning I'm going to put it in the slow cooker. The slow cooker, if it's on low heat, has to be in there from 8 to 10 hours. If it's on high, 4 to 6 hours. There are various ways to make the stew. You could make it stovetop, in which case you would do what I'm doing with the meat. Maybe cook a little bit more. You do the same thing with the vegetables. You put them in separately and kind of heat them up a bit, and then you would put everything together in type of a Dutch oven. In which case you only have to cook it for 2 to 3 hours in order for it to be completed. However, I think the most tender and the tastiest version of any stew is when you do it in the slow cooker, because the flavors get to commingle and they really come out that way. All right, so I'm going to finish browning this venison, and then I'm going to cover it, put it aside, put it in the refrigerator. Tomorrow morning I'll show you how I assemble it in the slow cooker, and then it'll be sitting in the slow cooker for most of the day until everybody gets over for dinner later on. Well, now on to the final step. I'm going to put the ingredients that I prepared, here's the vegetables, into the crock pot. I'm going to add the venison that we had coated and browned, and we're going to put here it is. I knew I had it somewhere. We're going to add a teaspoon of paprika, 2 cups of the beef broth, and first let me put in the Worcestershire. I'm going to put 2 teaspoons of the Worcestershire in. And yes, this Worcestershire, which I didn't have in the original ingredients, is gluten-free. And finally, we're going to take a few nice size bay leaves. I'm going to put 4 of them in. They add a really nice flavor. This is fresh. It's so fragrant. And I'm going to stir it up. Okay, cover up the crock pot. And I'm going to turn it on to low, and it's going to sit here for, it'll be about a little over 8 hours, 9 hours by the time we eat later on today. And it should be absolutely delicious. By the way, I did not put the peas in yet. You always put the peas in last whenever you make a stew. When it's done, I'll taste it, see how it tastes, see if I need to add any salt, any pepper to it. and then I'll put the can of peas with its juice in. If you put the peas in now, they just end up being mushy and fall apart. So you put them in right at the end. Okay, the stew has been in the crock pot for close to 9 hours. I'm going to take the top off, stir it, check to see if it needs. I'm going to just take a little bit of the liquid. Yep, you could use about a teaspoon of salt. So I'll put that in. All right. Stir it up. And now I'm going to take the peas that I opened. Remember, I'm going to put the peas with the liquid in the stew. Mix it up. Very good. Turn it down to warm. And it's ready to be served when the family arrives.